Haven't gone live yet. Give me a second. I'm closing out of some of my windows. All right, so a little bit of housekeeping I want to take care of before I continue with the stories I planned on covering today. Up until this point, I've been doing shows Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Mostly around 12 or 12:30 noon. That is now changing. Okay, that is now changing because of circumstances going on personally with me. So I'm not stopping the show, but I just can't do it as much as I want to and as much as I used to. So the shows are now going to be on Sundays. Okay, Sundays. I'm gonna say about 11 a.m. on Sundays. Okay. The only reason I'm doing a show right now is because I didn't get around to doing the show last week. So I didn't want to I didn't want to wait till next Sunday to do another show. I didn't want to go 2 weeks without a show. I wanted to, keep the family, abreast with what's going on my end. And then on top of that, I don't like doing late shows. Interviews are one thing, but because you're kind of on other people's time. But if it's something that I have control over myself, I try not to do late shows because I'm typically a lot more subdued. It's darker. I get tired quicker and things like that. So, but that's how it's going to be today. But this is not going to be standard. This is not going to be the norm. It's changing from Sundays now. Sunday mornings, basically. I'll say it like that. I'll just say Sunday mornings, and I'll be recapping all of the important news stories of the previous week. So my Sunday shows are probably going to be kind of long, honestly, because I'm gonna have a whole week of shows. I mean, not a whole week of shows, a whole week of news stories to really break down and really delve into. And you guys know how I like to really break down and break apart news stories, paragraph by paragraph. So yeah, sometimes those Sunday shows might go on about 3 hours, but 2-3 hours, but they'll definitely be on every Sunday morning, once a week. That's how I'm gonna do it for the time being until things change in the future. That's how it's gonna have to be. Because I do a lot of freelance work, and it's just my time. I'm being stretched a little too thin. But on to today's show. Okay, on to today's show. So there are a few things I want to discuss. I want to talk about the 2020 census and why that actually is a huge deal. It's a really big deal in terms of representation and democracy in America. I'm gonna break that down. I'm probably gonna spend the most time on that story. But then I also want to talk about very briefly. This is not even a story. It's just like a concept that I had in my mind that I really want to share with you guys about the power of harnessing technology for progress in the community and using technology to enforce empowerment in the community and excellence in the community. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes about that, not anything too long, but just a few minutes. And then lastly, I want to touch on the death of Winnie Mandela, which I was preparing that's something I added just today. I was preparing my notes for today's show last night, of course, before she passed away. And then, of course, I heard today that she had passed, and I was like, okay, I can't go a week because now I can't wait till Wednesday to talk about it because I'm not doing it 3 days a week now. So I can't wait a whole week to talk about her death. So I have to talk about it today. So I'm going to talk about that for a few minutes as well. So let's get started. So let me see. On Tuesday, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross okay, announced that the 2020 census will include a question asking whether or not the survey taker is a U.S. citizen. So obviously, this set off a number of alarms, a number of red flags as critics began to fear that this could prompt immigrants here, both illegally and legally, to not participate in the 2020 census out of fear of retaliation from ICE. Of course, ICE has been running rampant. They've I haven't even covered ICE the way I probably should. I mean, I've come across stories dealing with ICE and regarding ICE that sound like something from, a developing nation somewhere. Like there's so much happening in America up under our noses that we don't traditionally identify with being American. I know that's not, if people who know history know better, but in terms of what's accepted history and what's accepted information, what's accepted to be taught in schools and universities, a lot of the stuff that you hear about going on with ICE isn't stuff that people identify with America. But then too, you have a lot of things going on in American prisons that aren't readily identified with what it is to be American and things that are allowed in American. So, you have a lot of people who are worried about ICE and worried about retaliation and being split apart from their families. So this question that's being added to the census, or might be added to the census, we're going to have to see what can be done about this to stop this from happening. But this could have major ramifications. Now, the U.S. Census is one. Okay, it is one of the most critical elements of American democracy. Okay, and so this is something that people should be worried about as the 2020 census approaches. Okay, this is something you don't get a redo on the census. You can't wait for a new president to get in and say, okay, we'll just redo it. No, this only happens once every 10 years, once every decade. Okay, so the census is not just about counting how many people are in your country. Okay, it has one purpose. Okay, and that is the counting of the total population of America. It's not supposed to be about saying, if you're undocumented, then you won't be counted. That's not what it's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about counting the total population. Okay, undocumented or not. And then it's also not about placing people who are undocumented and who might check that box, placing them under greater scrutiny. Okay, and perhaps exposing them to legal activity because of how they filled out the census. That's also not, that's basically, it's an extremist far right interpretation of or I guess I should say it's a far right way of handling population count. Okay, if millions of people are not counted because of fear that they might get deported, okay, this is going to have a massive impact on how local and federal congressional districts are drawn and the allocation of federal funding. Okay, states get money based off of this stuff. So because an element of this 2020 plan comes off as an attempt by the far right to make sure states like North Carolina, Arizona, and Texas don't turn more blue because of population shifts. Okay, you guys got to understand, and I know, a lot of you guys already know this who might be listening to this. You guys are aware, but a lot of people don't understand this. A lot of people are going to say they're not really going to understand the underlying issue, and they're going to be like, okay, well, why are people getting so upset about a question of citizenship being asked? Okay, but when you look at the fact that it's going to have an effect on perhaps millions of people not being counted, you have to understand that this is a strategy. This is a strategy to keep states that Republicans need. Okay, the GOP needs to stay in power, making sure these states don't trend blue. Okay, because that's where we're headed. So listen to this, like, they want to intentionally, this is my perception, okay? They want to intentionally undercount certain populations of people. Okay, because the GOP depends almost entirely on white conservatives. Okay, white conservatives are their largest, or it's the GOP's largest and most important base. Or white conservatives are their largest cohort. So if these states that they need turn blue over time, then the GOP is gonna be in a situation where they're not gonna have any hopes of getting a president into office. They can't lose North Carolina, Arizona, Texas, and a bunch of other states because of Latinos and because of black people. They really cannot afford to lose these states. Okay, but their population is decreasing, and over time, over a decade or two, it could have massive ramifications on the ability for Republicans to put a president into office, because they just won't have the electoral power anymore. Okay, so in their eyes, the only way they can depend solely on white conservatives and still stay in power is by rigging democracy. Okay, and this is something that I've been touching on off and on for a long time now. Hold on one second. Yeah, so this is something I've been touching on for a long time. This is why I make such a big deal about voter suppression. It's not an issue. You can tell just by how people talk about issues. You can kind of tell the issues they value the most. And a lot of people, you can tell voter suppression is not a top 5 or even a top 10 issue. But understand this, people on the left, progressives and liberals, you're not getting anything you want. Okay, if so many people that you depend on, that Democrats depend on, and leftists in general depend on for votes, if you can't depend on their votes being counted. Okay, so this is the rigging of the 2020 census is an element of that. And this honestly goes beyond voter suppression. I mean, this is bigger than voter suppression in many ways. This is the rigging of democracy quite literally, and quite directly. Okay, so that's what this is all about at the end of the day. The question of citizenship has not been asked since 1950. Okay, so the implementation of this question of citizenship on the census is literally taking us back to the Jim Crow era. Okay, this is one of the most brazen assaults on voter representation that I have ever seen. Okay, outside of like a few like cross-check and stuff like that, this is like DEFCON 5 for representation in government. Now I said voter representation earlier, but outside of just voting, like allocation of resources, how maps are drawn, this is as close to the be-all end-all as we're gonna get. Okay, this is suppression doped up on steroids, essentially. So $675 billion is divided up and given to the states based on data from the U.S. Census. Okay, it impacts the Electoral College, as I said earlier, because the number of electoral votes states get depends on their population. So the census impacts everything in American life. I can go on and on and on. I'm just giving a few examples, a handful of examples. Now, we know, hold on, I'm getting this message. Hold on one second. Okay. So now we know for a fact that black people have been undercounted on the U.S. Census since the beginning of this country. Okay, I've never believed that we're only 13% of the U.S. population. Okay, I think there's a certain percentage of our population that isn't being counted. Okay, and there's data to back this up. Okay, they have data that shows that predominantly black and brown regions of states are the regions where they get the least amount of responses on the census. Okay, so I'm not going to speculate on how many I like in terms of the percentage. I think that's being undercounted. I don't think it's an astronomical percentage. So I'm not saying like 10-20% of our population is not being counted. I don't think it's that huge. And I don't think they'd be able to hide something like that, to be perfectly honest with you. But I could definitely see 1 or 2%, and that might be a little conservative. Okay, so there's one paragraph that I want to read to you guys that's linked in the description box of the YouTube video. Okay, and this is the like if you click on the link and you scroll down to like halfway through the article, you'll see what I'm talking about. It provides a snapshot of census response rates in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. If you don't know where Winston-Salem is, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and Greensboro, North Carolina. Okay, the darker the area, the darker the blue, the higher the lack of response. All right, so it says in North Carolina, the census tracts in metro areas with low census participation rates, indicated below in blue, like I said a second ago, tend to be largely poor and African American. For example, the population for one tract in Forsyth County in North Winston-Salem is 84% black. Okay, more than 60% of the population live below the poverty line. Okay, the census tract has low response score, a wonky figure calculated by the Bureau's Geography Division of 34%. So a region that is 84% black has a low response score of 34%. All right, now they kind of throw in there that you might have some far-flung, predominantly white rural areas that also have low response rates but that's honestly largely because they don't have the manpower to get people out to those areas. There's no excuse for that in large cities. Okay, so but if you take into account that if you have a situation where large cities are being counted properly and rural white areas aren't being counted, that should give more power to black voters or black people in those regions. But it's not actually happening that way. So let me pull up. Okay, here we go. So the right wing, many of whom are parallel to fascism. Okay, I don't speak in absolutes as often as I possibly can, as long as I catch myself. I don't like speaking in absolutes, so I'm not going to say everybody, but I'm going to say a large number of them, okay, are parallel to fascism and autocracy. Okay, that's why they like Trump. They don't care that Trump likes dictators. They like autocrats. Okay, that they're driven by authority figures, or they're drawn to authority figures. So they want to legalize. Okay, this is very important. They want to legalize the skewed counting of the white population versus the non-white population, so that as white people become a minority in America, they and the Republican Party can maintain their grip on power. Okay, they want to legalize this. So if they do that, if they're able to get away with putting this question on the census, okay, that's effectively legalizing bogus numbers and bogus data. Okay, and using that bogus data to make sure white people have a disproportionate amount of power relative to non-white people. Okay, it's very insidious. Okay, this could have devastating impacts on America long term. However, and if the census is rigged too, or I guess I should say, if the census is rigged, so too is American democracy. You can't have a rigged census and have a democratic structure or democratic apparatus that actually represents everybody. It doesn't work that way. So the average response rate is from an article that I just read from citylab.com. It's in the link in the description box of the YouTube video. So, so where was I? So yeah, so we can't be naive and think all we have to do, because a lot of people are thinking this, all we have to do is get Trump out of office in 2020 and everything will be okay. That's what people keep thinking. Okay, I want to get Trump out as bad as anybody else. Okay, so much so that I want to see him impeached. Now, a lot of people don't agree with that because they say, okay, Pence is worse, and that's true. But I'm looking at the damage that'll do to this administration's credibility, and then on top of that, I don't think Pence is electable. I don't see Pence winning in 2020. Okay, so if it means putting up with Pence, for a few months, assuming we gain enough seats in 2018 to neutralize the power of the executive branch, okay, if it means putting up with Pence for a couple years, and he's going to have no real power to do things because the legislative is going to be a check on his power, I'm willing to put up with that. Like that's how much I don't like Trump. Okay, but even if that were to happen, okay, think about this. The 2020 census shows you how the Trump effect can set America back decades, at least at the very minimum, at least 10 years. Okay, if not more. Okay, and we won't be able to correct this rigging of democracy at least until 2030 when the next census comes around. Okay, think about it like this. Look at Richard Nixon. Okay, look at Richard Nixon. Nixon was a one-term president. All right? Richard Nixon was in power from 1969 to 1974. Okay, he was a one-term president. He did not stay in power for 8 years. Okay, because we all know that he was terrible at his job. Okay, but even though Nixon was a disaster, and even though Nixon was a one-term president who, ran out of office, okay, and committed a complete assault on democracy because he tried to rig an election, we're still dealing with the drug war he created 50 plus years later. So Nixon coined the term the drug war, and he is credited with being the person who kind of created it. Now we know Reagan came into power and he took the bull by the horns and he just ran with it, and he turned it into something else entirely. Okay, but Nixon was the person who originally created the concept of the drug war. Okay, and you have a terrible president who created a terrible policy that is still in place all of these years later. Okay, so we don't know that future presidents will overturn all of Trump's disastrous policies. We don't know that. I've heard a lot of people in the media say, if we can get a Democrat into power, there needs to be a de-Trumpification process. And I do believe that, but think about this. We don't know how thorough that de-Trumpification process is going to be. We don't know if they're going to completely get rid of everything that he did. And like I said, the census is one of those things where I don't know the technicalities around. I know for a fact that it doesn't happen every. It's a set time that the U.S. Census actually occurs. You can't have, as far as I'm aware, a census a year after a census has already occurred. That's not how it works. Okay, so this rigging of democracy, this rigging of the census, is going to stay with us long after Trump is taken out of office. Okay, so Ari Berman wrote a really good article for Mother Jones. He's been on top of this. He wrote a really good article for Mother Jones. He was on Democracy Now! Recently talking about this. And the article that he wrote, I'm not going to read it, but I think everybody should read it if you really want to know more. It's called Hidden Figures: How Donald Trump is Rigging the 2020 Census. And he said, quote, "Of all the ways democracy is threatened under President Donald Trump, an unfair and inaccurate census could have the most dramatic long-term impact." Okay, of 12 states, and this is not the quote, this is just me talking now. Of 12 states that are, let me restart. 12 states basically are planning to sue the Trump administration over the question of citizenship, and 6 former Census Bureau directors going back to the 1970s have echoed objections to the adding of a question about citizenship to the U.S. Census. Okay, so according to reports, and I'm just going to end it really quick here. According to reports, this will be the first census. This is something else that people should really be alarmed about. This will be the first census conducted mostly online. Okay, so I was going to read you guys parts of the article, another article from Mother Jones called "The 2020 Census is a Cybersecurity Fiasco Waiting to Happen." Okay, I don't actually think Actually, no, I did put that in the YouTube video. So that link is in the YouTube video as well. They're talking about putting the U.S. Census online. Like, that is so bad. That is a horrible idea. Okay, we were hacked by the daggone Russians. Our voting system isn't flawless. Okay, you want to expose the U.S. Census to potential hacking? You want to talk about fraudulent entries? You want to talk about stuffing the census? Now, let me reread this, because this is something that I haven't seen. If people have been talking about it in the media, I haven't seen it. Okay, this is something that's kind of flown under the radar. Okay, for the first time, the census will be conducted mostly online. What could possibly go wrong? Okay, it's not a long article. It's only a few paragraphs long. Just check that out as well, because that's like the article says, that's a recipe for disaster. You're just asking for fraud. You might as well be begging for fraud, actually. So that's it for that story. I just wanted to go over that because I didn't get a chance to talk about it last week. So let's move on to the next topic. Harnessing technology for progress for empowerment in the community. I've been thinking a lot recently about solutions that I think are the most important solutions, like the solutions to some of the problems in the Black community that I think could go the furthest and have the biggest impact. Okay, so one of the solutions that I think definitely is political activism and just organization in general, just being more organized. That can only have positive impacts, not negative impacts. So that's definitely one of the solutions. A lot of people talk about business and industry. Okay, that's a solution. But I want to talk very briefly for a few minutes, not too long, about harnessing technology. So this is really about inspiring Black people to engineer our future, because I think that is foundational. Okay, we're still plugged in too much to the current system, and we're honestly still way too dependent. I was about to say independent. I wish we were more independent. We're still way too dependent on the system, and part of that is by design. I'm not blaming people. I'm not attacking people, but it is what it is. It's by design, and honestly, They want us hooked into the system because that gives them more power. They do all this talking about black people pulling themselves up or pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps. In reality, they want us dependent on them. Because a dependent population, I said this in the BIE video that I made a few months ago, a dependent population is a controllable population. A dependent population is more weak than an independent population. An independent and financially powerful population is very hard to control. Okay, and they know this. Okay, so when we look at solutions, we have to take technology into account. Okay, so that wouldn't be an issue. And when I say that, I'm talking about being plugged into the system, like being plugged into the matrix. That wouldn't be an issue if the state did right by the people, and if the social safety net were strong and not disappearing like it currently is. But that's just not the case. The social safety net is being attacked left and right. Okay, so you can't. I understand things are the way that they are now because people are kind of stuck in the repetitive motions of things that they've been doing for years. Okay, but we're at the point now, people are getting killed in the streets. Okay, you have these cover-ups of the murders of black people in record numbers. You have all sorts of problems in terms of climate change, in terms of representation in government. Okay, in terms of just a whole host of issues. There's so much going wrong right now in American society. We need to be thinking about radical solutions. Okay, so the black community needs bold, new, and disruptive ideas that we can capitalize off of. We really honestly need our own ecosystem, our own economic ecosystem. Okay, that's really what it's coming down to. Okay, technology opens the door for new streams of income if you find ways to take advantage of those things. And I'm not talking about from the point of view of using technology, okay, but designing and developing it. Okay, we're great at using the technology, okay, but I'm not seeing enough headway into the designing and the development of technology. Okay, and there's way too much at our hands. There's way too much at our disposal right now. Things that we can be building. Okay, and if not right now, in the near future, so within the next year or 2 years or 3 years, things that we can be building in the short term that will help out everybody. Not just help out ourselves individually, but help out everybody in the community. We need to be thinking about these things. I think we have to take a holistic approach to fixing the problems in the black community. We have to harness the power, like I said earlier, of political organization. We have to harness the power of community. We have to harness the power of business and industry. And yes, we need to harness the power of technology. We're kind of already doing that with social media, but again, we're using social media. We're not really designing our own. We're not designing our own Facebooks, our own Instagrams, okay, our own WhatsApps and our own Snapchats and all of this other stuff. And I mean, I'm seeing some people, I'm seeing some platforms come around now that are still kind of in the incubation phase, or maybe they're out of the incubation phase, and maybe they actually have a platform where you can go and you can log on and you can sign up and start using the platform. And that stuff needs to grow out and develop further, I think. But it's a start, but more definitely needs to be done in that area. So we have to get out of the mindset of being users of technology. Okay, we need innovators, we need developers of technology. Okay, we need people who know how to access the back ends of these social media platforms like Twitter. Screw Facebook. I'm so close. I want to delete my Facebook account so bad. I don't know why I haven't done it yet, because I think, me personally, I think it has more to do with me wanting to stay in contact with relatives, distant relatives and stuff like that. If I didn't have family on Facebook, I would have deleted that mess a long time ago. Especially after that Cambridge Analytica um, scandal. Okay, so we need people who know how to create separate social media platforms based on using the APIs. Okay, now that's a technical term, a developer term, but based on using the APIs, okay, and the SDKs of Twitter, for instance, or of Facebook, or of Instagram. Okay, that can be done. That can be done. Okay, and I know everybody doesn't believe in blockchain, but when you harness, if you're able to harness blockchain with social media and with just web development in general, there's a huge field just waiting to be tapped into. There's so much potential that's out there in the future, that as a community we can all capitalize off of. So I just wanted to put that out there. Just talk very briefly about the importance of harnessing technology for progress and using technology to promote Black empowerment and Black excellence. It's definitely something that we all need to look into. Coding, developing, engineering, all of that stuff is extremely important. It's a very powerful, very lucrative fields. So, lastly, before I end today's show, I have good time actually. Before I end today's show, I want to hold on. Let me retweet a few things. Give me a second, family. All right. Give me a second. Give me a second. For those people who are just joining now or joined after the show started, I just want to repeat this before I get on to Winnie Mandela. Um, Previously, up until this point, I've been doing shows Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Okay, around 12:30 noon. There are things that are going on my end personally, that where I'm really just kind of being stretched too thin. I have clients. I have clients in because of freelance work that I do. Okay, and then I have my normal job that I have, that I'm, working and have been working for a while now. So I really have two jobs, and then there's Black and Intellectual. There's the website. So Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I want to do that. I desperately want to do that. I love talking about news and politics. This is a passion of mine. Okay, I'm not doing this for the money because there's really no money in it for me because I'm too small time. I would need a much larger platform than what I currently have to be making money off of this. It's never been about the money. Like this is a pure passion project for me. I love talking about the news, and I love talking about stories that get very little attention, or stories that do get attention, get a lot of attention, but there's a very problematic narrative that the mainstream media puts out there that I don't believe is accurate. Okay, so I'm inspired purely just by news stories. Okay, but despite that, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays for me right now until things change in the future, it's just not possible. So my show times are changing. I'm still doing the show, okay, but I'm doing the show. It's now going to be a weekly show, and it's going to be on Sundays. And that Sundays might be a little bit better because people are off on the weekends for the most part. I know a lot of people still work on the weekends, but a lot of people are off on the weekends, and it's going to be a Sunday morning show. So I'm thinking maybe around 11 a.m. is when I'm going to be doing the Sunday morning shows, and I'm just going to recap the whole previous week. So the Sunday shows are probably going to run 2-3 hours, Okay, because I'm gonna have a lot of stories that I'm gonna have to get through. I'm probably gonna be talking about six stories sometimes. So that's how things are gonna be for now, for the foreseeable future. If things change, I will let you guys know. But this is why I didn't do any shows last week. It's not because I didn't want to do any shows. It's because of just all this chaos going on right now in my life. So yeah, so that's an update on that. So the last story before I end today's show, and then like I said, my next show is going to be on Sunday. I definitely want to talk about Winnie Mandela. I cannot pronounce her middle name, so I'm not going to even try because I would butcher it. You you guys know how I am with names. I like butcher foreign names like it's nothing. So yeah, she passed away today, unfortunately, and she led a very productive, very fruitful life. But her early years, man, the early years during the apartheid era were were some of the hardest things that any person could ever have to deal with. Okay, she dealt with so much, like in I wouldn't even be able to go over everything. Like I need like an entire hour just to do her story justice. Probably even a couple hours to really do it justice. And I just don't have that type of time. Um, but I don't even have like honestly everything she was forced to deal with before and after Nelson Mandela's arrest and prison sentence could fill volumes of books. Okay, she is easily, in my opinion, one of the greatest freedom fighters um, of the modern age, of the modern era. I say that based on all the people that I have talked about. But when you look at some of the things that those apartheidists, those white supremacists in South Africa, and by the way, I might get some trolls from South Africa. I noticed that video I made about what's going on in South Africa right now about land appropriation. Man, that video attracted a lot of haters. That video attracted a lot of trolls. Like I kid you not. But yeah, like they put her through so much, and she met Nelson Mandela in 1957 at the age of 22. Okay, and they married a year later in 1958. And she was just as instrumental in the anti-apartheid struggle, if not more, than Nelson Mandela. And honestly, she went harder than Nelson Mandela. Okay, she was, in my opinion, more of a radical than Nelson Mandela was. Okay, and because of that, she was tortured. She was kept in solitary confinement for well over a year. She was victimized. She was assaulted on numerous occasions. But she always stood her ground. She was not afraid of the white supremacists. And this is a mindset. Honestly, everybody can't have this mindset. Everybody can't think like this. Everybody's not going to think like this. Okay, because with the mindset that Winnie Mandela had, okay, it was like the mindset that the Haitians had during the Haitian Revolution. Okay, it gets to a point where the oppression gets so bad, okay, that I don't want to say you don't care about your life, but you start to realize that the struggle is bigger than that. The struggle is bigger than your personal safety. Okay, and a lot of people don't even like thinking about that, much less acting on it. Okay, but when you really study some of the most aggressive and some of the biggest freedom fighters of the past, 50 to 100 years, they all share this trait. They were all ready and prepared to do things that the common man wasn't ready and prepared to do. And she really can. She doesn't get in my opinion, especially in terms of like Western media, she doesn't get the recognition that she deserves, in my opinion, based on my reading of history. You know, people talk a lot about Nelson Mandela, and rightfully so, but she was even critical of Nelson Mandela. Like, she called out Nelson Mandela. Let me read some quotes to you guys, and then I'm probably going to end it. Where the heck is? Okay. Okay, so these are 10 quotes that Winnie. Okay, they have her last name here. I'm not going to pronounce it because I would butcher it, but Winnie Mandela will be remembered for. Okay, and this is from Business Insider South Africa, but you know it's their South Africa branch. You know, so it's from people in that area. So um, something else before I read this, I was going through some of the articles today that were written about basically announcing that Winnie Mandela had died, and it's something very strange. You can tell a lot of these corporations basically just copy and paste each other's headlines because they were all calling her a campaigner. Like she was running for office when she was fighting against the white supremacists, apartheidists in South Africa. They were calling her a campaigner. I saw that headline after headline after headline. I was like, what are you guys copying and pasting your headlines? Like, you guys aren't being original at all. But I digress. Let me just continue. Here's the first quote from 1966. To those who oppose us, we say, quote, strike the or oh no, let me restart. To those who oppose us, we say, strike the woman, you strike the rock. Okay? 1966. Height of the civil rights movement in the United States, by the way. And then in 1986, 20 years later, together, hand in hand, with our matches and our necklaces, we shall liberate this country. Okay, with our matches. Okay, so she was not afraid to use language that could be construed as being violent. That's how and even some of the haters, some of her critics are trying to put certain things on her and really trying to sully her name and drag her name through the mud, and drag her legacy through the mud. But they will fail. And then another quote: I am the product of the masses of my country and the product of my enemy. She said that in 1996. This is something very important. Like, and this is something you will see in a lot of radicals. Okay. We cannot be afraid to call people who do not care about our lives our enemies. Okay, it's just one of those word usage things. You know what I'm saying? People get this thing where some people get very politically correct, and you know they will say things like, "Oh, we shouldn't call white supremacists. We shouldn't call them our enemies. We shouldn't say that." Why? If they have their way, okay, rest assured, our lives will be on the line if they have their way, and they have a president in office right now who's literally trying to take this country back to the Jim Crow era. So if white supremacists aren't your enemies, then who are? Then who is, basically? Another quote, 1962. I will not allow the selfless efforts of my husband and his friends to be abandoned. I will continue the struggle for a free and equal South Africa. Okay, she kept up the fight when Nelson Mandela was doing all that time in prison. Okay, and if you guys think back to that 3-part miniseries, Madiba, not Mandiba, Madiba, that came on, what was that, 2000, Was that 2016? Yeah, it wasn't last year. It was definitely 2016 when that the show, the miniseries that was on BET, if I'm not mistaken, starring Lawrence Fishburne. A good show, good miniseries, by the way. It told me some things that I didn't even know. It taught me things I didn't even know. She kept up the fight. They didn't properly, I think, express that in the show. Because the show I think was more about Nelson Mandela than it was about Winnie. But yeah, they definitely showed her how she was in prison, how they were storming her house, dragging her by her feet out of her home. It was crazy. It was absolutely insane during that time. Now here's another quote. They think because they have put my husband on an island that he will be forgotten. They are wrong. The harder they try to silence him, the louder I will become. Okay? This goes back to what I was saying a second ago about Winnie Mandela. She said in 1987, quote, "There is no longer anything I can fear. There is nothing the government has done or there is nothing the government has not done to me. There isn't any pain I haven't known." Okay? So, and then the last quote I'll read is she said, quote, "It is only when all black groups join hands and speak with one voice that we shall be a bargaining force which will decide its own destiny." She said that in 1976, echoing the ability of black people to come together and control our own destiny. Okay, again, this is an element of the black radical tradition. Okay, whether you're talking about in America, you talk about in Africa, in South Africa, because there's always been a close relationship between black South Africans and African Americans. Our struggle has been similar. Okay, and she's echoing this. She's echoing this viewpoint, and it still needs to be repeated because a lot of people just don't get it. A lot of people just don't. A lot of people refuse to do this. A lot of people refuse to link up. Like I see people who are quicker to attack other black people than they are to build up other black people. Just because they disagree with them on policy positions. So that's all I wanted to say. It's been a long day, but I hope you guys had a great day. And definitely follow me on Twitter @_blackintellect. Check out my blog, blackandintellectual.com. I will be back, just to repeat it for one last time. I will not be back Wednesday or Friday. I will be back Sunday. I will give you a very long, thorough show, and I will recap news basically from tomorrow till Saturday. So that's all from me. Definitely like the video, share it, all that good stuff. And oh, by the way, YouTube has changed so many things. If you want to see my next stream, and even after I post this, I'm going to be breaking this particular stream up, and I'll be posting the separate parts over the next few days. If you want to see my videos pop up on your feed and even on your phone, you actually have to click the little bell on the YouTube channel, on the YouTube videos, which is stupid. I hate that YouTube has this extra layer of content where you can't just be subscribed to people anymore to see their content. You have to now hit the bell. So definitely do that for me, and we are going to continue to do what we do. We're going to continue to grow, and it has been a great day for me, but it is now over. And so have a nice day. I will talk to you guys on Sunday.